Folks, can I have your attention? We are still gathering nominations for the Talmud Torah Award winner. Joe? Bob? Okay. I have nominating forms. Norman and I have these forms. Norman, you want to hand them to anybody who doesn't have one? Nominations close next Saturday, next Shabbat. So if you have somebody in mind, I urge you to fill out a form. You can either drop it off at Janice Basin's office, you can email it to her, you can bring it to me, you can bring it to Norman. We'll make sure that form and a nominee on it get considered. Does anybody need a form? You can, thank you, Joe. You can do it online. Anybody else? Please.
Okay. Okay, good Shabbos. Here we go. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-shabbat lasot et ha-shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-shabbat lasot et ha-shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beinu v'nei Yisrael ot hi leolam oti leolam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael es ha-shabbat lasot et ha-shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-shabbat lasot ha-shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi shavat vaynafash shavat v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-shabbat lasot et ha-shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei b'riah gafen. Amen. L'chaim. Okay, blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, good Shabbos, everyone. Torah portion is Ki Tetzei. Couple announcements. First of all, if you want a Jewish calendar for Publix, they're here. I got a whole box of them. They're fine. They're nice. They've got artwork. But they do have all the dates of the... what's cool about this one is not only does it have all of the dates for the holidays and the Hebrew dates, every day's Hebrew date, but it also has, specifically for Miami, Shabbat candle lighting times. So if you want one, they're here. I don't want any of them. I've advanced to more, advanced ways of finding out what the date is. And I already know when Shabbat is. So, but if you want one, they're actually very nice. So they're here if you like. Also, if you haven't heard about the Mishnah Torah Challenge, I think most of you are probably signed up. If you don't follow me on social media, then you're probably not aware of it because it's the only way I've announced it. How many of you know what it is? A lot of you. Okay, so just quickly, I've made a new way of learning Judaism, something that I learned when I first became a rabbi, and I started meeting with this Orthodox rabbi in Charlotte, and we recognized together that my Talmud was pretty weak because I went to a Reform rabbinic school, not an Orthodox rabbinic school, and we don't focus on that. There's some things I knew that he didn't. In Reform rabbinic school, they're better at philosophy, theology, much better at Jewish history, but they're much better at Talmud. So he got me caught up. After every morning, I would go and work with him, and then after he taught me how to really study Talmud, then we went through the summary of Jewish law that Maimonides wrote, the Mishnah Torah, which we often bring here. And we did it through this class that his rabbi in Jerusalem was teaching. And I had to change my phone. This was before the internet really did anything. This is a long time ago. So I had to change my phone plan so that I could listen to lectures from Jerusalem 3 times a week without, going broke. So I was watching a TikTok video a few months ago, and it was an Orthodox rabbi talking to a young boy, and he said to him, make sure you learn, it's kind of like you give some advice, make sure you floss and, whatever. So, but they're not as concerned with their gums as they are with Jewish law. So instead of telling the kid to floss, he said, make sure you learn the whole Shulchan Aruch, which is volumes and volumes of material. And I said to myself at that point, I've never been through the full Shulchan Aruch. I've been through a lot of it, but I've never been through all of it. Now, the Mishnah Torah is pretty much very similar. But at that point, I said, all right, I'm going to go through the whole Shulchan Aruch. So I've done about 5 chapters a day. Well, I've done exactly 5 chapters a day ever since. I've done about almost 150 chapters of Shulchan Aruch in the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to go through the whole thing. It'll take me a few years. I'm going to finish the whole thing. But I said to myself, I should really make this available to anyone who wants to learn. And then I said, but I don't have time, so I'm not going to do it. And then I said to myself, yeah, but you have to. And then I said again, I don't have time. And then, in just a real moment of weakness, I went on my social media and I said, all right, I'm going to do it. So if you would like to spend 10 minutes a day learning Judaism, you could quadruple what you know about Judaism every week for the rest of your life. So I've created this system. It's the 10 minutes of study a day of Maimonides' Mishnah Torah. Maimonides summarizes the entire Talmud. So if you did all of Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, you would know every single law in Judaism. But if you want to do it in 10 minutes a day, I'm going to show you how. And I'll help keep you accountable, and I'll help guide you along the way. All you have to do is come to the orientation tomorrow night on Zoom at 7 p.m. If you want the link to go to that Zoom orientation, it'll take about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. But then you'll unlock Jewish law for the rest of your life. If you want to come, go on my social media. It's kind of tricky to remember my Instagram. It's Rabbi Barris. It's Rabbi Barris. So, you may say, I couldn't find it, it's so esoteric. It's Rabbi Barris. Or on Facebook, a little harder, it's Jeremy Barris. So if you enter in either one of those, you'll find me. You send me a message, I'll send you the link. If you just refuse to use either one of those, you can email me, and I'll also send you the link. But we've created a Facebook group where I'm going to be posting all the weekly, citations to study. Everything that you need to do this is free on Safaria in English. Everything. It's free in English on the computer. But I'm going to show you in the class how to access Safaria and how to do it. So if you're interested, it's 7 p.m. tomorrow night. And so far, a lot of people are interested. We've over 100 people so far signed up, ready to go. So, but this group, if anyone, would get the most out of it because you're the ones who study Torah the most regularly. Is it 7 or 7:30? 7. No, 7. Everything's at 7. The Eagles played 8:30. We want to be well and done before kickoff. So, all right. Now, Torah portion this week is called Ki Tetzei. Instead of giving you a long introduction, because we've already wasted some time and we have a lot to get to, I want to cover one very interesting story here called the Ben Sorer Umoreh. Okay, that's the name of this topic, which is discussed by the rabbis throughout history extensively because it's one of the stories in the Torah that makes the least sense and seems the most harsh and seems the most implausible, and I can't believe we do that. And that's what you would think if you just read it until you learned about it. So here we go, Norman. We're beginning of the Torah portion, chapter 21, verse 10. Very, very beginning of the portion. Chapter 21, verse 10. Here we go.
When you take the field against your enemies, and the Eternal your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her, and would take her to wife. You shall bring her into your home, and she will trim her hair, tear her nails, and discard her captive's garb. She shall spend a month's time in your house, lamenting her father and mother. After that you may come to her, and thus become her husband, and she will be your wife. Then, should you no longer want her, you must release her outright. You must not sell her for money. Since you had your will with her, you must not enslave her. If a householder has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one. When he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat his firstborn, the son of the loved one, in disregard of the son of the unloved one who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot to him a double portion of all he possesses. Since he is the first fruit of his vigor, the birthright is his due.
Now, all of that was like a good introduction to what I want to focus on today, which is the section called Ben Sorer Umoreh. So if you look in verse 18, it says, if you can read Hebrew, Ki yeh li'ish, if a person will have Ben Sorer Umoreh, okay, which my translation translates to a wayward and rebellious son. Now, Rabbi Kleppi gave a very interesting sermon Devar Torah last night where she explained how everything in this Torah portion leads to the next thing. So why would you have a Ben Sorer Umoreh? Why would you have a son who's so awful, and you're going to see what happens to this wayward and rebellious son? Because you married a woman that you found on the battlefield, and you ended up having a son with her, and because out of your lust you had this marriage, now you got a son who doesn't get who's not doing what he's supposed to do. And the whole Torah portion goes on and says, because this happened, then this happened, and because this happened, then this happened, and that's what this Torah portion is all about. And there's a very famous expression, Rabbi Kleppi mentioned it in her Devar Torah last night, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, avera goreret avera. Anyone ever heard that song? Yeah. Hey, avera goreret avera. Goreret means to drag to. So in Israel you see a lot, rechev zar yigarer. Right, what does it mean? A car that's parked where it's not supposed to be, yigarer, will be towed. but it really means will be dragged. So one mitzvah leads a toad to another, and one sin toes to another. So if you sin, it's probably going to lead you to a life, to another sin. If you're doing a mitzvah, it's going to lead you to another mitzvah. And this Torah portion is an example of that. If you want to learn more, you can go back and watch Rabbi Klepi's Devar Torah on our website. But now that we've built up to that, we get to this story called the Ben Sorer Umoreh. And there's not a lot, but there are a handful of Hebrew terms you should know. Because if you're ever having a discussion about Torah, no one's ever, people really know Torah. They would never say, oh, did you read the section about the rebellious son? They say, no, the Ben Sorer Umoreh. That's just how people talk, who are in the Torah world. Like if I said, Egel HaZahav. What's Egel HaZahav? The golden calf. Now here's a tougher one. Gid HaNasheh. What's Gid HaNasheh? The sciatic nerve that was wrenched by the angel to Jacob, and it's now not kosher to eat that. So a kosher butcher has to take out that particular nerve of an animal for the animal to be kosher. That's one of the laws of sacrificing of a butcher, is they have to know how to take it because it's not kosher to eat that. But nobody would ever say the sciatic. When you say sciatic, any rabbi's thinking, yeah, because I sit down too much. But when you say Gid HaNasheh, they know which part of the Torah you're talking about. Okay. Here we go. So let's get into it now. Verse 18. Edith, this is what we want to focus on today.
If a householder has a wayward and defiant son who does not heed his father or mother and does not obey them even after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community.
Okay, now, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a section of Torah that disturbed you more than this. This is unbelievable. This is extremely outrageous and radical until you get into it and figure out what's really going on here. But if you just read it on the surface, what Edith is about to read is outrageous. Okay.
They shall say to the elders of his town, "This son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Thereupon his town's council shall stone him to death. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid.
Okay. Now, if we did this, the meager numbers of Jewish population would be much less even. Right. I don't know how many Jews would be left if we did this. There's a problem, right? This is a problem. Because what we just said is, if a kid doesn't listen to his parents, now this is a kid. And we throw stones at him until he dies. Okay. Now, we have to figure out what's going on here. So let's start with Rashi. Judy, would you at the top of the page? Let's define, according to Rashi, what we've called this person. We gave a name to this person. We've said it 6 times. The Ben Sorer Umoreh. So Rashi says, well, before we get into that, what do those words even mean? What does it mean to be a sorer? What does it mean to be a moreh? Now, we translated it as, my translation is wayward and rebellious. You may have a different translation in Plowed or wherever, but let's see what Rashi says it means.
Sorer means one who deviates from the proper path of life. Umoreh means one who is disobedient to the words of his father, of the same meaning as
Mamrim.
Mamrim, in the phrase from Deuteronomy 9:7. Rabbi, you got it. Ye have been rebellious.
Okay, now, according to the Talmud, we're talking about a kid who's on the verge of his bar mitzvah. We're talking about like a 12-year-old kid who's just, weeks away from his bar mitzvah, almost about to turn 13. Okay, so now they chastise him in verse 18 it says, if a man will have a wayward and rebellious son who does not listen to the voice of his father. What's interesting is it says, the man has the father, not the parents have. The man has the son, not the parents. Not listen closely. The behavior, the reason why it says this is because it mentions the mother. So it says if a man has the son, but who doesn't listen to him or his mother. So why doesn't it say if a man and a woman have a son who doesn't listen to the voice? Because what the Torah is saying is the man lusted after the mother on the battlefield. And because the man has shown to be kind of a sinner or a lustful person, the son probably learned his wayward ways from his father, and it's really more the father's responsibility for the poor behavior of the son. However, it just happens to be that he doesn't listen to his mother either. But he learned these rebellious ways from his father. That's how the rabbis interpret this. You could say it means something else, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. But then you need a good answer for why does it say only the father is responsible, not the mother.
But Rabbi, there's also, what's the likelihood that a 12-year-old is going to be a glutton and a drunkard?
A glutton, I have no problem.
Glutton, yeah, but drunkard at 12?
A drunkard, look. You don't lock the liquor cabinet. Look, who knows? This is a long time ago. I don't know. You want to change it to 17? Be my guest. We sent our daughter to Tulane because it's 41% Jewish. Just came out in the Wall Street Journal, the #1 party school in the country. What are these Jewish kids doing? I mean, good luck. Yeah. So, all right. What are you going to do? All right. I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about the other kids. All right. They shall chastise them. Let's see what Rashi says here.
And they shall chastise him, admonish him in the presence of 3 people, and if he still remains refractory, they cause him to be lashed through the court in Sanhedrin. The refractory and rebellious son is not liable to the death penalty until he proves to be a thief and eats at one meal a tartamar, which is a weight of a half of a maneh flesh, and drinks half a log wine. For it is said of him, Zolel Ustava.
Okay, so if we just go back to the verse for a second, and then we'll come back to Rashi here. It says we learn a little bit. So we say to them in verse 20, they shall say to the elders of the city, okay, here's our son. He's a ben sorer moreh. He's wayward and rebellious. He doesn't listen to us. And there's one other thing that we know about him. He's a glutton and a guzzler. Okay? So, yeah, I mean, today we call that a fraternity brother. Right, but back then it was called a zolel v'soveh. Right, Joe? Right, so that's why Rashi says we don't call him this until he takes a drink of a half a log of wine, which isn't that much, and a meal. Okay, now, so I'll just read it so I can explain it. And then it says, don't be among the wine guzzlers, et cetera, et cetera. So the refractory and the rebellious son is put to death on account of the final course of his life. Oh, all right, so hold on. The Hebrew is a little more clear here. What he's done here. Oh, it says it clearly. The refractory, so if you look on the third line here, you see the line that starts 218-11? The refractory and rebellious son is not. So what do we know about him so far? We know he doesn't listen to his parents and that he eats and drinks a lot. But that's not the problem. Rashi tells us here's the problem. How do you know when this kid is a problem? The rebellious son is not liable to the death penalty. In other words, it's no big deal. If he's not listening to his parents, okay, fine. But there's one point where it gets to the point where he breaks one of the 10 commandments. Look what it says here. Well, he already has. He's broken out 2 because he hasn't honored his mother and father, but now he breaks another one. Look what this one is. Until he proves to be a thief. This food, it's not only that he's eating and drinking, but he stole it. And he stole it from his parents. And then he eats a certain amount. Okay, so now that he's stolen food and wine from his parents, and he doesn't listen to them, now we have a real problem. But Rashi points out, until he actually steals the food and the wine, we'll live with it. Right? He doesn't clean his room. He doesn't make his bed. It's annoying. But once he starts stealing, we have a problem. Okay, so that's the main point that Rashi's adding here. And then we say this. The refractory and rebellious son is put to death on account of this is where it gets very problematic. On the account of the final course his life must necessarily take, not because his present offense is deserving death. The Torah has fathomed his ultimate disposition. In the end, he will squander his father's property, and seeking in vain for the pleasures to which he has been accustomed, he will take his stand on the crossroads and rob people, and in some way or other make himself liable to the death penalty. Says the Torah, let him die innocent of such times, and let him not die guilty of them. Yeah, anyone ever see that movie, The Minority Report? Yeah. How many have seen the movie? Not a great movie, but an interesting concept. What was the concept? Remember Tom Cruise? Right, so they would go in the future. The movie's called The Minority Report with Tom Cruise, and they would arrest you based on a crime that you hadn't committed yet. And so these people are getting arrested. They're like, why am I being arrested? Because you will kill someone. But I didn't do it yet. Yeah, but we'd rather you didn't. Huh? So what we just read is very troubling. What we just read is very troubling. Because what Rashi is saying, and he's quoting it from the Talmud, the Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, like page 71, 72, has a lot of discussion about this. And the rabbis throughout the last 2,000 years have a lot of discussion about this. And what they're saying is, this rebellious son, who is now a thief, is going to do horrible things in his life. And if we kill him now, we can prevent those horrible things from happening. Which is extremely problematic. Extremely problematic. Stuart, can you pass the mic to Stuart?
I'm also kind of intrigued by what your lead into this in terms of the father's responsibility for the offspring's behavior, which brings in a kind of genetic component. If the father was a lustful person, and he transmitted that to the son, and the son is being punished, and we are trying to wipe out evil from among us, the father is left with his own faults and his own genetic shortcoming.
Very interesting.
And that we overlook, that we don't punish, that we, there's an inconsistency here that bothers me a bit.
Okay, so give me 31 minutes, and we'll deal with it, because you're asking the right question. Here's one other point. We read in the Torah that evil is punished to the third and fourth generation. which means to say that if you sin, it sounds like the Torah is saying if you sin, then your son is going to be punished for your sins, and your grandson is going to be punished for your sins, and your great-grandson is going to be punished for your sins, but that's not what it means. What it means is if you're a sinner, then your kids will learn from you how to sin. And then they will sin. And then they will be punished. And it's your fault for teaching your kids how to sin and that it's okay to sin, and then they get punished for it. There's an interesting movie. You ever see 42? The movie about Jackie Robinson?
Yeah.
Really, really good movie. So there was a scene where Jackie is playing a game in Cincinnati. And there's a father with his son, and they look like the all-American father and son watching a game together, and they're talking about baseball, and they're having a wonderful time. It seems so wholesome. And then Jackie, and this guy seems like a wonderful dad and a wonderful guy. Then Jackie runs out to the field, and the guy turns to him and yells like horrible racist stuff at him. And then the son, wanting to be like his dad, little kid, like 8, 9 years old, also yells out racist and horrible stuff. Where'd he learn that? I think there's a statement that no one's ever born a racist. Right? You learn it. So this kid is now sinning on his own, but it's the father's fault. So what it says is it takes 3-4 years. The Torah is saying it takes 3-4 generations to cleanse of a sin. That's how dangerous it is. We've seen throughout time that we're going to look, I don't want to reveal all my cards yet. But we're going to see that it goes a lot longer than that. Yeah.
And now they're starting to look to the parents for these kids who are shooting up at school.
Oh, right. Right. Wow, your kid shot someone? I'm stunned. What'd you give him for Christmas? AR-15. Oh, wow, I can't believe it. How could this happen? Right? Yeah. Okay, now, this is going to get more interesting. We're just getting started. Verse 21 says, all the men of his city shall pelt him with stones, and he shall die, and you shall destroy the evil from your midst, and Israel shall hear, and they shall fear. Okay, so from this, it says, from here we derive that the law that his execution requires public announcement by the court. The man named so-and-so was stoned because he was refractory and rebellious, which means to say there are 4 different times in the Torah where we see this, where it says, and they shall hear and fear. What Rashi's telling you is if you look through the Torah, there are 4 sins that are so bad that if you do them, then after they killed you, they would make a public announcement that so-and-so died for this sin. All the other sins, they didn't make the public announcement. But this one was so severe that they wanted people to know, this is such a terrible crime, don't do this, and they would make an announcement. Now, I don't want to give it away yet. I got such good stuff. But I got to hold on to it for now. Yeah. Bob, can you use the mic?
Certainly. If you go back up, it says, the son is not liable to the death penalty until he proves to be a thief.
Right.
It's not the minority report where you're going to do this. We're going to take care of it before you do it. Mm-hmm. And of course, Rashi says he proves that he is a thief.
Right.
That's inconsistent with let's take care of him before he commits the crime.
Okay, hold on. So, once he proves that he is a thief, and he steals something that doesn't really, it's not so consequential. Okay, stole a little bit of wine and some food, but it's not the end of the world. It's an indication that when he gets older, he's going to do really horrible things. So, what Rashi's saying is, in order to prevent those horrible things from happening, we need to kill him. However, as problematic as that is, We aren't bothered by that because we know Genesis 21. Right? Because we're now in Deuteronomy and we did Genesis already. Right? Okay, so what do I mean by that? Yeah.
I think HRS should have gone in there to figure out why the father was withholding food.
You think who should have gone in there? HRS? Oh, DCS. Okay.
No, because
Right.
why are they withholding food from this kid that has to steal it?
Okay.
And maybe he even has some genetic hyperphagic syndrome where he needs more and he can't help it. And I don't think he sinned at all or stole anything.
The Torah gets a lot into the hyperphagiac syndrome. You see that a lot, mostly in, no. It's possible. Look, all of that is possible. All of that is possible. But I think what the Torah is, the way, and Rabbi Kleppe actually explained it, she explained it very beautifully last night. The Torah is trying to show that this is a case where the kid was brought up wrong. And now we're seeing that the kid was brought up wrong and he's turned out bad. And he could turn out even worse than the father.
A kid taking food in his house, I don't think came up wrong and is bad. I think he's hungry.
Could be. Could be.
Where does the Torah say, where does the Torah punish the father?
Okay. Hold on. You guys got to bear with me because a lot of these questions are going to come, but I don't want to give it away. Jay?
Is collecting wood on the Sabbath one of those four?
No. Well, actually, I'm not 100% sure. The list is in Sanhedrin. It might be. I honestly, I don't remember what the four are. I can, it's in Sanhedrin in the 70s, somewhere in there, but I don't remember exactly what the four are. I'm sure it's idolatry. Maybe breaking the Sabbath is one of them. Let's look, if you could skip back, because I know we're all fired up right now, but I want to show you something that may ease your mind. Genesis 21. Okay, if you could, anyone shout out 21, chapter 21, verse 5. Chapter 21, verse 5 of Genesis. What was it? 137. Page 137, if you have Plow. Okay. Ed, would you mind reading?
Are you talking about verse 5 or verse 15?
Verse 5. Through 15. Can we pass Ed a mic, please? So, coming from behind you? Behind you, Ed. All right, no rush. Yeah, verse 5. Right, and Abraham was 100 years old?
Okay. Now, Abraham was 100 years old. Yeah, 138.
138, sorry.
Now, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children? Yet I have borne a son in his old age. The child grew up and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham playing Mitzahek. She said to Abraham, cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be continued for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed. Early next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes and went and sat down at a distance, a bow shot away. For she thought, let me not look on as the child dies. And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. God heard the cry of the boy, and an angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heeded the cry of the boy where he is.
Okay. And then she says, come lift up the boy and hold his hand, for I will make of him a great nation of him. And the angels, well, look what happens. Look at Rashi. the way that verse 17 ends, this famous phrase, Ba'asher hu sham, where he is. Now, remember, in our case, the rebellious son, it looks like the kid is being judged for things he hasn't done yet. But here, Ishmael, who, now remember, Rashi is writing in the 11th century. The Muslims have now taken over most of the world. 90% of the Jews during his lifetime lived under Muslim rule. 90%. Almost all of them were treated poorly. Every single one of them was considered a second-class citizen, and most of them were under huge pressures, including unbelievable taxes, almost no livelihood, humiliated on a daily basis for being Jewish. And those are the descendants of Ishmael, who we just see became a mighty nation who would oppress the Jews tremendously. We don't have any problems with the Muslims anymore. I think everything's got worked out, pretty well. But the angels are going to say, and here's the question: if you take pity on him now, and a great and mighty nation is going to come of him, and we know how they're going to treat the Jews, how can you do this? Look what happens. Okay, so look at, Ed, would you mind reading continue the Rashi, 21:17 from this, for the voice of the lad?
The voice of the lad. From this we may infer that the prayer of a sick person is more effective than the prayer offered by others for him, and that is more readily accepted.
Okay, so by the way, that's just one point. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But if you're sick, we all get sick sometimes. God listens to your prayer for yourself more than other people's prayer for you. Right? So if you pray for someone who's sick, that's great. God will listen. Unless the person who's sick isn't praying for themselves. Now, if you're so sick that you can't, if you're in a coma, okay, no problem. But if you can and you don't, if you're in the hospital with a torn Achilles, okay, you're in a lot of pain. But it wouldn't kill you to say, God, could you make this feel better? Right? But if you don't believe that God has any healing power, then why should other people's prayers help you? Okay, so that's just a minor point. You can take it or leave it. That's what Rashi says here. But what I really want to focus on is the next Rashi, Ba'asher hu sham, which means judging Ishmael where he is in his life at this moment, which is totally different than what we see at the Ben Sorer Moreh. So let me just say this very clearly. The Ben Sorer Moreh has shown indications that he's going to be a bad guy, and he's being judged on what he's going to do in the future. Whereas here, God is saying, I'm judging Ishmael on who he is right now. So there's a contradiction here, and it's within the contradiction that we learn the lesson. But we have to see the contradiction first. Okay, Ed, here we go.
Where he is, according to the actions he is now doing, shall he be judged, and not according to what he may do in the future.
Right, the exact opposite of what Rashi says with regard to the Ben Sorer Moreh. The exact opposite. Okay?
Because the ministering angels laid information against him, saying, Master of the universe, for him whose descendants will at one time kill your children with thirst, will you provide a well? He asked them, what is he now, righteous or wicked? They replied to him, righteous. He said to them, according to his present deeds will I judge him. This is the meaning of what is written.
By the way, so you could say, well, this is Rashi writing in a time where, there's plenty of Muslim persecution going on in the world. But Rashi's just quoting the Midrash, which was written before Islam. I mean, not all the Midrash, but this particular Midrash, Genesis Rabbah, was written before Muhammad was born. So it's not like he's saying this because Islam is going to come and persecute the Jews. He's writing this because the descendants of Ishmael were destined to persecute the Jews. It just happened that they ended up becoming Islam, or at least the Muslims believe that they descend from Ishmael. Okay, so here we go.
Okay, this is the meaning of what is written. For God hath heard the voice of the lad in that condition in which he now is. Where did he, Ishmael, kill Israel with thirst? When Nebuchadnezzar carried them into exile, as it is said from Isaiah 21:13-14, the burden upon Arabia, O ye caravans of Dedanites, unto him that is thirsty bring ye water, etc.
Right, so there's already documentation in the Tanakh of tension between the Ishmaelites and the Jews. By the way, remember when Joseph was sold into slavery? It was a caravan of Ishmaelites who picked him up. Right? They existed, the descendants of Ishmael. They didn't get along so well with the Jews. Okay.
When they were bringing them near the Arabians, the Israelites said to their captors, "We beg of you, bring us to the children of our uncle Ishmael, who will certainly show pity to us."
Right, so when the Ishmaelites were persecuting them, they said, "We're related. You descend from our uncle." That didn't work. Right? That didn't go so well. Right? Okay.
As it is said, O ye caravans of the Dedanites, read not Dedanite, but Dodin kinsmen.
Right, so they're called the Dedanites, like that's a term for them. But the Hebrew word is actually, why do we call the Ishmaelites the Dedanites? Because it comes, the word for uncle, dod. So, but it can also mean, ani ledodi li, I am my beloved's. Dod, we're close. We're related. And this is how you're treating us. Okay?
Okay. These indeed came to them, bringing them salted meat and fish and water skins inflated with air. Israelites believed that these were full of water. And when they placed them in their mouths, after having opened them, the air entered their bodies and they died.
Right. So I guess you don't want to inhale air when you're, dying of thirst and to eat really salty foods. And, the Ishmaelites wanted to actually kill the Jews and not protect them. Okay, so we have what God is saying to God's rebuke of the angels, though, is he says, Ba'asher Husham, how can I judge Ishmael for things that his descendants are going to do? He never did that. I guess there was another Rashi that I didn't bring, but where he basically, he says, oh no, it's here. So if you just look at the second line on that back page. What is he now, righteous or wicked? And the angels replied, he's righteous. And God said to them, according to his present deeds will I judge them. He's innocent now. Yes, his descendants are going to do terrible things to the Jews, but he himself is innocent. How can I judge him? And the rebellious son, okay, he's done something wrong, but not to get the death penalty. And we're giving them the death penalty of the horrible things that he may do in the future. And so these are two different cases. Now, here's the issue. Of the four times in the Torah, the Talmud explains this, but of the four times in the Torah where it says they would announce it so that everyone would hear it, there is a line in the Torah that says, hachrazah, they make an announcement. But of the other three, you have that, and of this one, you don't. Which means the Torah, even though the Torah says, if there ever is a ben sorer moreh, you should tell everyone that this happened, there's no line that said they actually made the announcement, or that you have to make the announcement, whereas the other three you do. And the rabbis understand this to say, that's because this never happened. And every rabbi who ever existed will tell you, we've never seen this. Maimonides wrote in the 12th century, this has never happened. And in fact, the Talmud makes that point by saying, we don't actually do this. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. And the Torah's hint that it doesn't happen is because by this sin, of the four sins that you have to announce in public, the other three say they made an announcement. And here there's no announcement. And so not only is that the hint, but every rabbi going forward from through this whole period, all the way through the Middle Ages, have said, I'm not aware of any court that has ever seen this. This has never happened. We don't do this. And the reason we know we don't do this, first of all, you have a problem, because if you did do this, the court would be aware of what it said with Ishmael. We say, well, there's a distinction here. So we see a case where it does happen here, that you're supposed to do it. And we see a case with Ishmael where you're not supposed to do it. And even God, the ultimate judge, judged Ishmael, he says, Basher Husham, these famous words. We judge him where he is, not with what's going to happen. That's not a Jewish idea. You can't do that. And by the way, what this Ben Sorer Moreh kid's going to do is nothing compared to what Ishmael's descendants had done to the Jews. It's crazy. And in such a case, Ishmael, even him, you'd say, what his descendants are going to do, we don't do it. And by the way, Ishmael was righteous, but he was still a very problematic figure. He was still an idol worshiper. It's not like he was innocent. He just hadn't killed anybody. He didn't deserve necessarily the death penalty yet. Because, by the way, why did Ishmael never deserve the death penalty, whereas a Jew today who worships idols did deserve the death penalty? Because he never accepted the Torah. All our souls were there at Mount Sinai. We all accepted the Torah. He never accepted the Torah, so you can't hold him accountable for it. Sure?
One of the things that's bothering is the one beforehand is you learn to sin from your father.
Right.
Ishmael's father was Abraham. He wasn't the sinner. So there's a big difference. Yeah, but the other one beforehand, when you said it was a gluttonous person and
Right.
he lusted after his wife, he learns from the father.
No, okay,
didn't
so
learn.
if your father's a sinner, there's a very good chance you'll learn from him. You can become a sinner in and of it on your own, though. Look at Esau, right? I mean, you could come at it, on your own, but if your father's a sinner or your mother's a sinner, there's a bigger chance.
Right, but then you're not put to death. That's
Right.
the whole thing. Ishmael or
Right.
Esau was not put to death for that.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I was teaching a class earlier this week. Alfred was there. He can vouch for me. And I had an idea. Now, the rabbis, we want to get to the answer of why is there a distinction? Why, in the case of Ishmael, do we say we don't judge people according to what happens in the future? And over there, we say we do judge people according to what happens in the future. And isn't this just a kid? Isn't he innocent anyway? He hasn't even had his bar mitzvah yet. What's the big deal? Okay. So the rabbis have lots of different answers for the distinction. I just want to boil it down to the basic one and then suggest an idea that I had this week based on something else I was teaching somewhere else. So I think the point of the story is this. It's purposely exaggerated for a reason. We would never, no Jewish court would ever let a parent or the townspeople take a kid out and throw stones at him until he dies for stealing some wine and a meal. We would never allow that to happen. But at the point where you have a kid who doesn't listen very well and is an annoying kid and drives his parents crazy, and it gets to the point where he's even willing to steal from his own parents, that is such an indication that he's not going to live a Jewish life, that he's spurning Jewish law, that you need to do something really drastic because you've reached the point where it's clear he's going the wrong way. And if you don't do something drastic now, you're going to lose this kid forever. That's the metaphor. How do I know this never happened? Because every rabbi who ever lived said, who's ever seen this? This has never happened. We don't do this. And there's the hint the Talmud comes out and says you're not allowed to do this. Now, I think there's an idea here that I maybe gleaned just from something else that I was learning this week. You can take it or leave it, but it's an idea. And the idea, I think, that we can take from how you need to relate to this kid and how you need to, if you see a problem, how you need to react to it before it becomes a bigger problem, can teach us a little bit about international relations. Because what happens is you have an incident that gets blown out of proportion. There's a button. Okay.
That's the way we're kidding.
So-
Put it in here.
Just turn it off.
It's defective technology. Okay, so there are moments that, relationships deteriorate. And they deteriorate to a point where it's almost impossible to go back. We see it actually in Israel between Orthodox and non-Orthodox. It wasn't always like this. We didn't always say you're not even Jewish. We didn't always say you can't be a citizen here. We didn't have these. But it's gotten so vicious over the years. And it used to be that even though Israel was divided politically, 90% of the country, of the Jews, were all Zionists. We all love the country. We all defend the country. We're from different political parties, but we're in the same foxhole. And today, it's so bitter. The pro-Bibi, anti-Bibi, they have come together to fight. But where the country was before October 7th was a disgrace. It was so bitter. Same thing in this country. Okay, Republican and Democrat, but we worked together. We were civil. And now it's so bitter and so disgusting. And it just deteriorates and deteriorates. And if you think about it, what happened to our people at the hands of the Christians once the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, and the torture that we went through that only really culminated and ended with the Holocaust, it didn't have to be. Because in the very beginning, I was teaching about Judaism and Christianity earlier this week. In the very beginning, the original Christians, a lot of them were Jewish. And they kept Torah. And Paul recognized a place for Judaism. So I just want to show you, look what Paul said. This is Romans 11. This is Paul's epistle to the Romans. He said, if some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. Right? Meaning the Jews are the root, and the Christians are a new branch that's grown off, and the Jews support you, and okay, fine. So you're two branches of the same root. And if we would have had, the ICCJ, the International Conference of Christians and Jews at that moment, and we could have all got together at that moment and said, hey, let's get along. Let's find out a way to make it work. I mean, it still wouldn't work because the Romans were a disaster, but that's where it was at Paul. I mean, we could have been there. 100 years later, Justin the martyr. So we don't have to read this whole thing, but he says, if you just skip to the last three lines, end of the third to last line, accordingly, God promised to him a nation of similar faith, God-fearing, righteous, and delighting in the Father. Like you Christians, you'll get a similar faith to the Jews, but it is not you in whom is no faith. You means the Jews. You Jews, you don't believe in Jesus, you're out. That's not what Paul said. But Justin the martyr changed it. And the relationship deteriorated. And by the time it got to another 100 years, Augustine, for if they lived with the testimony of the Scriptures only in their own land and not everywhere, the obvious result would be that the church, which is everywhere, would not have them available among all the nations as witnesses to the prophecies which were given beforehand concerning Christ. I must have cut it up, but it goes on to say, because you Jews killed Christ. Now, if Paul would have written, yeah, I know it says that they killed Jesus, but that's not what it means. And that's not what happened. And by the way, we can prove that. And it makes no sense according to Jewish law. All the different ways that Jesus was killed. He was killed. His trial was on Passover. Jews aren't allowed to have trials on Passover. He was killed by crucifying. Jews aren't allowed to kill by crucifying. He was judged at night. Jews aren't allowed to give judgment at night. I mean, none of it made any of the sense according to Mishnaic law. The Jews wouldn't have been for any of that. But had there been people there who were reasonable on both sides, who could have said, you know, if you write this thing that the Jews killed Jesus, in the future, at some point, that may not go so well for our people. Right? If you get in on the ground floor, like the Ben Sorer Moreh, and you say, this looks bad, let's solve it here before it blows up. Maybe we can prevent some horrible things from happening. The Ben Sorer Moreh, that's the whole point. It looks like something really bad is about to happen. We need drastic, urgent attention to this kid before it blows up and he goes crazy. So I just gleaned from it in the world that we live in today. The very first time, you know, someone would have said, all Democrats are lying to you. All Republicans are lying to you. Anyone who supports Bibi is a fascist. Anyone who doesn't is a radical liberal who wants to give back the state of Israel to the Palestinians. The very first time those crazy things were said, if there were people there who said, how dare you? Not in our society. Then you could prevent the deterioration of all of these things. Problem is, in a democracy, there are people who can benefit from tearing us apart. The news, you know, I would contend that it would be very, you know what it would be great if we had an American president at some point in our history going forward who had an approval rating of like 90%. If we were actually happy with someone, it'll probably never happen again. I don't know if it ever happened to begin with. But there were times where there were popular presidents. And the reason why it can't be is because no matter who wins, there will be a whole set of media whose only job it is to tear that person apart, no matter what they do. And all that does is deteriorate. And there should have been a time that said, news has to be news, not just opinion. But there's no such thing as news anymore. And the Torah is telling you, if you allow these factors of society to blow up, once you see originally that they're a problem, then great, you're going to have to live with the consequences. You may never be able to recover from them. And the one thing we can't afford to never be able to recover from, this is the beauty of the Torah, is every single Jew needs to be connected to Torah. And from an early age, if you see a kid who's deviating off the path and he's not interested in Torah, you need to react right away and jump on it. And I think that there are a lot of implications on that for the societies that we live in and for the world that we live in. And gosh, could you imagine if reasonable people could have been there with Paul and said, listen, Paul, could you write in a few things? Just point out that, we didn't kill him. Just point out that, okay, you believe in Jesus, but the Jews still have a relationship with God. If you just could have gotten in on the ground floor and prevented replacement theology, we could have saved 2,000 years of suffering. So, when we have a chance, like the Ben Sorer or Moreh, to be on the ground floor and change things before they blow up, that's the Torah is telling us that's what you're supposed to do. What you can't do is throw stones at a kid until he's dead. That we don't do. All right. unfortunately, there's a lot of money to be made in polarizing people.
That's cable network news.
Yeah, and the internet and Twitter, all that nonsense.
The people doing the polarizing.
Yeah, they're in it for the money. They don't have a core value among them.
Power.
Yeah, yeah.
You said something I'm not sure really believe.
Okay.
So I want to healing power of prayer.
Yeah.
So let's say I don't believe in healing power of prayer, but my wife does. She wants to pray for me. You said, why bother? If I know, because God sent it to come for me, and so I think even I could be wrong and she could be right. So let her pray, and then God will listen to her prayer.
And then you'll be converted over to believe it.
No, I still won't believe it. Because I'll think it's
Well,
Is
yeah.
this really you? You don't believe it?
right.
We'll talk later.
It doesn't. I mean, what I believe is one thing.
No.
No, honestly, because the Jewish law
Yeah.
doesn't have room for non-believers. You know, the Jewish law is you have to believe in God.
Okay.
Otherwise, what's the point of being Jewish? Now, we live in a more evolutionized period where we have liberal Judaism and we have different answers for that. And correct, I believe that if your wife prays for you and you don't, it helps. But Jewish law, writing in the Middle Ages, never could have conceived of that. You know?
Like when you do the prayer during service, you don't ask the person who's saying the name, well, you have to believe because they're not.
By the way, you don't have to believe. You don't have to believe so much in that there's a God who gave the Torah to Jewish people. All you have to, when the Torah talks about belief, you just have to believe that there's a higher power out there that created the world. You don't have to have any like specific. But if you don't even believe that, then the Torah has like a problem with you. I don't. Reform Judaism doesn't. But Torah law from 3,800 years ago doesn't quite compute with that.
They were smoking something.
Yeah, which is fair. But that's why we're reformed. The Torah also says I should be excommunicated, or during the times of the temple, stoned to death because I drove here. So, you know, we don't hold by that.
Don't go. Don't go. I just want to. So this whole thing about stoning the kids.
Yeah.
What about? You don't have to answer. I just want to throw it out there.
Yeah.
The Jewish value of repentance and forgiveness. That's not in there at all.
That's the whole point of it. Is you've got to get this kid to repent because he's going off of the path.
Right. Yeah.
No, I don't think they do that. I don't think they ever.
Well, that's what the whole Torah portion.
No. That's called metaphor. The Torah is going. This is one of those cases where we don't take the Torah literally. Even Maimonides said so. This is metaphor. The Torah is going to extreme purposes to show you how serious this is. That this kid is meant for a life of terrible things. We've got to intervene. How's it start?
NGE.
NGE. I got it. Yeah. Okay.
I actually wrote here, I said me too, and I figured you didn't know it, but you won't know.
No, I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant.